Hello, all. Nice to see so many people. Can everybody hear me all right? Marvelous, marvelous, marvelous. Good to see so many familiar faces and some new faces. We'll give it one more minute to get some people in and we'll get cracking fairly sharpish. Um, As I've mentioned in the emails that we've been sharing in the run up to this is around kind of looking at ways in which we can provide a wide range of services as well. I know a lot of you do lots of bits and bobs in that regard anyway, but we're just going to be having a looking at some more sort of detailed ways of this. Right. So, as some of you will know, my name is George, and I am Plunkett UK's Impact Officer. I have been in this position for since around April time, I think. And before that, I was part of the community business team. So I know I've spoken to quite a few of you on the phone over the years with one thing and another. As I say, my role has changed now. I focus more on how Plunkett can deliver more social impact and how we can share some of those ideas with the groups like yourselves that we support. We work around sort of five areas of impact, one of which is protecting access to goods and services. So we want to make sure that when we start providing these services, we kind of have a robust way of looking after them as well. So can everybody see my screen and the slides as well? Fantastic, fantastic. So, just as I say, my name's George. I am joined today by Plunkett's membership manager, Sarah Ben, who is helping out with the chat and things like that. Just to let you know, we are recording, so please feel free to have your cameras on or off. It's entirely up to you. It's whatever you're comfortable with. We may share this as a resource afterwards. So as I say, I'll leave it up to you whether or not you want to be on screen. I'm aware that we are coming up to lunchtime. For those of you like an earlier lunch, please feel free to get stuck into any food. We try and sort of do these at a useful time for everyone to be able to get on board. So if you feel the need to have something to eat during this, please feel free. So, as I say, one of the areas of impact that Plunkett focuses on is protecting access to goods and services. At a time when services, particularly from rural areas, are being stripped away, we find that community-owned businesses are in a unique position to fill that gap. And so we'll be talking a little bit about what that looks like today. So a lot of you who have been with Plunkett or spent time with Plunkett will be familiar with the idea that we talk about of more than. So more than a pub, more than a shop. It's the idea that being you sort of running a community-owned business, we want to see groups, and so many of you do so many brilliant things. We want to see groups going over and above what you would expect to see from a normal enterprise type that you're involved in. So more than a pub, as I say, more than a shop. And I think just by being part of a community-owned business, you're already committed to delivering more to your community just by the nature of your involvement. It's something that I think community-minded people are naturally drawn to. I'm quite involved in my local community. I know Sarah is as well. And I think that's kind of what drives the Plunkett ethos is trying to create better communities for us all to be a part of. And the more than idea really does get illustrated when we look at the idea the survival rates of community-owned businesses. Short term over the first 5 years, it's 97.5% survival rate. And more long term, that only drops to 94%. And I think one of the major reasons for that is because these businesses are born out of business plans that reflect the communities in which they sit. You guys have gone out into the world, you've consulted your community, and you have put together business plans which reflect the needs of those communities, and that's a support in and of itself. One of our co-workers at Plunkett is Laura, who some of you may know, but she came to Plunkett originally because she's been heavily involved in the Appleton shop where she lives. And just a quote from her that was in one of our recent reports. A number of elderly and vulnerable village residents prolong their time living at home independently thanks to the support and understanding of our staff and volunteer team. We hold spare front door keys for forgetful residents and work with grown-up children of older residents with dementia to ensure they are supported in their shopping visits with payments made by relatives. And this is what we mean when we talk about more than. Some village shops that aren't community owned might offer that, but I think as community owned businesses, we're more predisposed to be thinking about that side of things when we sort of plan what we'd like our community owned businesses to look like. And I think another strand of that idea, and this quote is from the State of Rural Services report published this year from the community interest company Rural England. The voluntary sector has become increasingly important in the delivery of welfare services, often acting to provide support in areas where state or private sector delivery may have in the past been expected. And that touches on a little bit about what I mentioned before in terms of community owned businesses filling the holes left by the stripping away of services. And whilst we'd love to be in a position where our local governments were able to support us more in these ways, unfortunately, we are looking at massive holes in budgets and things like that. And this is where the community business model can really step up and sort of be a huge crutch for a lot of people in our communities in that regard. Um, those of you who have seen our recent Better Business report might have noticed some of the pie charts in there. And some of those focus on the sort of community-owned businesses Plunkett are supporting and you guys are working in. They include things like, obviously, we talk a lot about shops and pubs, but outside of that, we've got things like breweries, distilleries, woodland projects, farm projects, energy projects. There's all sorts of things going on. And as the sector grows, I think we're going to see a more diverse range of business types as well, simply because the need exists out there for these services. And I think when we talk about being more than or sort of adding value or that wide range of services, it can look like a lot of different things. I think if we think about the very basic stuff, well, not basic, but the more usual stuff, it's that business within businesses. So you might have a post office in a shop, you might have a shop in a pub, particularly if you're a really remote area and there isn't and your community owned business is really the only service serving the local community. You might diversify that way by sort of having a more of a hub based thing with three or four things going on, so sort of shops, cafes. Libraries is a really interesting one as well. I was looking at the report mentioned in the slide a couple of slides ago, and it turns out that 75% of libraries in the UK are in urban settings. So what we've seen is community-owned businesses having things like book swaps or little libraries as well, just in a corner of, say, a pub or a community-owned shop where you can come and you can access literature. And I think this is what when we look at the first item here with access to arts and culture. It's so easy to overlook the work being done by you guys out in the field, as it were. And I know a lot of you are keen to make sure that your community-owned business is a gateway to other things as well. We see a lot of pubs giving local artists the chance to show their work on the wall of a pub. We see sort of bands and musicians being given their first chance to play live in these pubs as well. And what it means is it's a low cost, particularly with music, when the cost of going to see live music is going through the roof. This is that you're providing a service by giving access to these events. We think about low cost or free social events during the day, particularly if you're in a pub again. It might be a warm hub or it might be a pay what you can lunch where not only are you able to provide people with nutritious food, but you're reducing that social isolation aspect as well, which a lot of people feel quite keenly. And in talking to Sarah yesterday, preparing for this, she made a really excellent point that not everybody wants to use the community-owned business for its core purpose. And not everyone wants to go to the pub. Not everyone's going to need to go to the shop. But what they might do is if you put on an alternative event for these people. So it might be the lunch club at the pub. It's about thinking about, well, these people aren't going to use this space, but this space is a community hub. How can we get more people in? How can we get more people through the door? It might be calendar events, sort of Halloween, Christmas, Easter, all of those things, those social events that bring us all together. We see a lot of education talked about with community-owned businesses. I know a lot of shops want to work with primary schools to get the kids in to understand about budgeting and shopping and just using money and paying for things. Um, Medical support might seem like quite a strong idea to have for a community-owned business. I mean, I'd imagine there's very few um, trained, qualified doctors that are working on these committees as well. But when we talk about medical support, it might be CPR training. It might be, I know some pubs have health workers. They work with sort of health organisations and have a health visitor come out once a month and do a drop-in session. With digital access, it might be that you live in an area that still hasn't got super fast broadband, but in your community-owned business, you might be able to do a deal where you can afford to do it and bring people in, and it's not just that those shared working spaces for people who work from home. It might be people who want to learn how to use AI, for example. They might be a bit nervous about AI and they might want to have sort of taster sessions, and local councils often will be able to facilitate things like this if you give them a setting in which to do it. It's all about working with those around you and dovetailing to create those services which really benefit the local community. So that's where we are with those, and we'll touch on those a little bit later. But today we're really lucky to be joined by Laura Sewell, and Laura is somebody I met last year at a co-op shares practitioners event. And Laura is the executive director of a community-owned hub in Oxford called Flows, and it's situated in Florence Park. And when I went there, I was completely blown away by the depth of services there, and and just what was on offer for one of Oxford's more diverse parts of the city. English isn't always the first language spoken there, and a lot of the people who live locally face challenges that flows are really good at giving them the tools to face. So just a little bit about flows. As I say, they're a community-owned hub in Florence Park in Oxford. From talking to Laura and reading some literature around it, they really are strongly sort of aimed at providing better opportunities for the community, but also kind of giving people the opportunities to make the most of life and really thrive as Oxford residents as well. So on site there, they've got, among other things, there's a cafe, a plastic-free refill shop, a nursery for young children based around nature, which is really cool. We saw some of the kids playing while we were having a tour, and they looked like they were having an amazing time. And one of the most brilliant things I saw was that there's an access to midwifery services for local people, and quite often with different languages available as well. So I would imagine if you live in a country and you don't speak that language particularly well and you have a baby on the way, it must be a terrifying time. So to be able to access in your first language services like that, I think are really important. Now I appreciate that. Flows is based in a city and it has a lot more space to work with. Um, and this is so it's not sort of I'm not here suggesting, oh, you should all have midwifery services in the pub and things like that or the shop. But what I think Laura is really going to be able to talk to you guys about is some of the challenges faced when you try and deliver a wide range of services, and maybe a little bit about how the thought processes behind choosing what to do and what to offer the local people. So, without further ado, I will hand over to Laura, and let me just get on the right slide. Laura, thank you so much for joining us. I hope I haven't blethered on too long, but over to you, really.
Thank you. And yeah, really hopeful opening actually, thinking about all the opportunities. and seeing how many people are on the call and sharing this kind of vision for communities to address the social issues that exist in their area. So yeah, really grateful to be here with you all. So I was thinking about this question, which I think initially it was sort of how community businesses can broaden services to support local needs. And I was trying to think like what underpins our ability to do that and the successes we've had, sometimes the failures we've had. And the thing that comes up time and time again in all of our work is around trusted relationships, the kind of people power that the very nature of being in a community business means that we're all familiar with that sort of people power. And that really bold communities do grow within that ecosystem of trusted relationships. So thinking how how some of these projects that we now run and that are more established started. And at Flows, I would say almost everything we do has sort of started from organic conversations and relationships. One of the most powerful ones that you were mentioning there, George, was the NHS midwife partnership. So we have NHS midwives who rent a clinical room and an office in our building. They're remarkable professionals, wonderful group of people to work alongside, and they're supporting families in their time of real need and often high vulnerability. Our centre used to be a children's centre, like a family-based centre. So the midwives have been there a long time, but all of the other statutory services fell away when the cuts to children's centres happened. So there was a community takeover, and Flows was born as a community hub looking to continue support with families and also do more for the whole wider community. So the midwives have always been there, and for as we were establishing, it was a kind of, we were in the same space but not really working together as such. But there was a recognition from some of the staff that actually you could see the strain on their faces sometimes. We would hear stories of feeling quite lost in the complexity of the cases that they were dealing with. And it is not that they didn't have the skills, but actually that the system didn't have space or time for them to respond to the women that were coming to them with the high needs because of the deprivation in the area that we live in. And our team looked at that and thought, what is our role here? How can we help to kind of close that gap a little bit? So an example of a woman sitting in the waiting room, not waiting to see the midwife, but her focus is on her eviction notice that she's just been served. The midwives desperately needing to support this unborn baby, but actually their first thing that this woman wants to talk about is the fact that her housing is insecure. The midwife suddenly has to step in as a housing advisor, social worker, crisis navigator, all in one moment, and doesn't really get to the work they need to do with this woman. So we thought, what can we do here, and how can we broaden our service to support these women and the midwives, actually, because we want them to be able to do their job really well. So out of that conversation with the midwife sparked a broadening of our service and the beginning of a relationship in partnership with the local health trust. They funded a pilot, and 3 years on, Equal Start Oxford is now a much more established maternity equity project. We focus specifically on women experiencing disadvantage. And our team, we have 2 workers who specifically do casework with the women. So midwives can, as soon as they see a case who needs help, support with housing, it might be translation. We do a lot of translation because language barriers. It could be employability, all sorts of things, domestic violence. They can refer those women to our team for some support on site. And then we've also implemented sort of peer support for those women where they're doing training. So you were mentioning training earlier, things like paediatric first aid, language interpretation, so that the women can support each other in their midwifery appointments, so it's not a strain on our staff. And I think those sorts of initiatives are great because we're not just thinking, right, how can we fix this? And we don't want to entirely become a new service that then also is relied upon. We also want to build capacity in the community so that the women can support each other. So the ability to translate for each other in midwives appointments is really, really valuable, and it enables the midwives to focus really on supporting the women with their birth journey, to keep these babies safe. Because we were aware that the data shows that women, particularly women of colour, are 4 times more likely to die during childbirth. So there was sort of some statistical information behind it, but it all came from these sort of organic recognitions, noticing, listening. And then you get strategic, right? And I think that's something I wanted to bring in, that community work, as you will all know, can be really messy, complex, lots of different people, lots of different perspectives. So we do try to have sort of an overarching strategic plan to help guide us. It's not always possible, but at Flows we call them our 3 pillars. So we have protect the planet, improve equity, and serve the community. And so we try, if something comes in and it doesn't fit in there, we can say, sorry, but it's not for us. And then we also ask the question, is this for us to deliver? Is this for us to partner, potentially providing the space but not doing the delivery? Or is this for us to signpost? And I think it's really, those 3 things are really helpful for us in going, oh, do you know what? Actually, let's not dive in too much, because I heard at the beginning you said, George, like, we all want to do so much. We are doing this work because we care and we want to improve what's our communities, but we can't do everything, and we don't want to burn out our staff and our volunteers. So having a bit of a kind of strategic head on as well, because the many voices and multiple things going on are, we could go on forever. And I think whether we're rural or urban, that challenge is the same, really. Our communities, whether it's isolation, stigma, fragmented services, no buses, social inequality, they're all things that we will see in our areas. And I think local businesses have an opportunity to bring a bit of heart into their interactions with the local people to potentially improve some of those things. And we really try to ask a lot of questions of ourselves and of our community. And I think it does take courage, but we often try to lean into the negative feedback as well. I'll write the 3 things into the chat at the end if that's helpful. Actually, no, I can just quickly say them. So are we going to deliver this work? Are we going to partner with someone who is going to deliver this work, or are we going to signpost to somebody else who's going to deliver the work? So that was just a question in the chat. So we want to ask for feedback, but what we recognised in feedback was that our community members are often the same people who were galvanized to get involved at the beginning. The people whose voices can be the loudest aren't necessarily the voices we also always want to hear to help identify what improvements and services we make. So we tried to ask who's missing from the conversation, whose voice isn't here, and how can we get to those people? And we absolutely don't get it right all the time, but we do hold that as an intention to kind of think, right, are we making decisions for people here, or are we doing things with them? And I think that's key. And that helps to really make a broader impact. So I was just going to give a few examples of projects that we have started and kind of talk through how they've come to be and what we've learnt from them. And all of them I'm trying to sort of show the power of listening and understanding as part of the journey towards choosing what services to deliver. So our refill shop that was mentioned earlier isn't getting the high footfall that our community cafe is. And obviously retail and hospitality are different industries, but ours work closely together. So we've been exploring how can we improve that. We don't want to it's such a valuable volunteer opportunity working in our refill shop, and we see great journeys for people through to paid employment, even within our organisation. But we still can't justify it losing money, and it was at that stage. So, but when a local artist approached us with her cards and artwork, it sort of sparked an idea that maybe we could go into thinking about including local artisan gifts. And at the same time, we learned that some local fair trade shops had closed. So we've sort of made more bold decision to go, okay, we're not just a refill shop, we're also going to be a gift shop, and introduced a new range, and have found that we are now getting new clients coming in. People aren't just coming to us for their refills, they're expanding what they think of coming to us for. They're telling us the products that they like. We're taking feedback, and it's early days, but we're seeing definitely a much broader set of customers now coming into our community shop. And that was initially sparked by a conversation, with a local artist. So just to sort of think about how to remain open to the possibility of different things. We also, in thinking about improving income generation in our cafe space, so the cafe donates back its profit into our kind of more charitable work every year. And at the moment, it doesn't cover a particularly high proportion of our charitable work. So we do get grants from people like the lottery to deliver our community work, but we want to, improve that. So we were thinking, right, we've got time that we're not open and not being used is potentially time lost that we could be generating income. So we thought, okay, we'll do some evening events. We'll have some quiz nights and some food nights. And we did a couple, and they didn't, what we found was the amount of effort they took to host didn't really make them a viable business idea. And then we thought, okay, we've got a really vibrant community here. Lots of people are very engaged in the place where our community business is. So we identified a local actors group who do kind of sharings with the local public, a bit like a comedy night. And we basically set up a partnership with them where they can hold their sharing events at our space instead of a hall. So we could provide the catering, the drinks, the warm space, and they provide a captive audience of people who already are familiar with them and want to come and see them perform. So it was just a really mutually beneficial arrangement. And I think co-locating with other groups like that is really key to success. A third one, I hope these are all interesting to you all, but I think it obviously we have quite a wide variety of things going on at our space, but the third one is an LGBT group. So we had a staff member who was from the LGBT community and some families in our nursery who were LGBT families. And they suggested a parents group for them so that they had a kind of space to really connect with other people like them, so their children could see other families like them. And it was a really positive group. Our family worker helped to sort of set it up and provide toys and things, and that group went on for a year or so, and it started to peter out a little bit, and we looked at it and we realized actually the children were getting bigger, the little meeting room we had and the toys we had weren't quite appropriate, and we had a chat with the parents who attended that group and actually mutually agreed Flows isn't the place anymore because the kids want to be more mobile, want to do different things. So they relocated to one of our partners down the road, a local community farm. The parents took it on. We didn't stay attached to, oh no, we're the ones that run the community LGBT group. We just said, yeah, you take that on. That's called Rainbow Families. That now meets somewhere else. And, everybody got something really positive in that time. And also sometimes it's time to move on. And that feels like a really good thing to remember, like to step aside sometimes, and you don't have to take the lead. This is that thing of, do we deliver this, do we partner with this, or do we signpost? So it kind of moved from delivering to then partnering with the parents, and then eventually signposting on. If somebody asks now, we can send them to their new group. And then another one which I think could be a really interesting one for rural communities, particularly. So just like where we are in East Oxford, you have people living in high levels of deprivation, living literally next door to people who are really affluent. And I know in rural communities, you often have these real pockets of rural deprivation. One of the things that we have done a lot of work with, and a lot of our partners do, is emergency food support, free food, and food parcels, food banks. But we've been looking at what's a more sustainable solution for families so that they are being supported to sort of pathways out of that poverty, and also getting access to healthy food, because we have been finding that the surplus food supply these days is quite unhealthy. So we have done some research and found a model of food cooperatives where one of our staff members is trained to support people to set up their own local community food co-ops. We bring people together who live close to each other or share a kind of cultural context, and they then pool their money and bulk buy food, and then distribute it among themselves. It helps to save, I think it's up to 40% of that on their bills. But it also has a lot of unexpected and really connecting community impacts in terms of bringing people together, and people getting to know each other more. There was a really lovely story about this, again, illustrating the organic nature of community work, that when we shared this concept with the East Timor Women's Group, which is a group of women, so it's a country in Asia that there's a high population of East Timor people in Oxford, and a lot of them access our maternity support. We shared with them about food co-ops, and it sparked for their community a memory of a practice back at home where the women traditionally collectively save money into a pot, community pot, which then any of those women can call upon if they have a crisis or a moment of need. And this conversation about the food co-ops has actually ignited them setting up one of these little community savings pots for themselves, which I just thought was so lovely, because we could never have guessed that would happen. But by giving people a space to come together and connect and co-create, that these natural occurrences can sort of flourish. So yeah, those are some projects that we have set up, and I think underpinning all of them is partnerships. So for us, you've heard me talk about health. We also have a lot of we partner with local authority. We have what are called locality workers from our local authority who do community support work. We have healthcare professionals outside of maternity, also just local charities, local groups, all sorts of things. And I imagine in rural communities, GP practices, schools, care homes, local hairdressers. There's potential in all of these partnerships and relationships. And I think we try to really view ourselves as part of an ecosystem and think about how we can really root both down so that we become stable and secure in our business, but also across, what can we do across to amplify our impact? And there are so many issues, like for an example being, bus services in villages can be terrible. If the community businesses come together, and not just community and local businesses and schools come together to campaign, that voice is so much more powerful. We recognised a lot of women in our pregnancy project were being put into supported temporary housing that didn't have access to a kitchen, and obviously that's really risky for a pregnant woman trying to eat healthily. But because we had a number of organisations we were connected to recognizing the same thing, we shared that with the local council, and they actually did make some changes to the way they housed women so that they were having access to cooking facilities. So it's really demonstrating how collective voice and partnership can improve our communities. So yeah, I think the theme I think I want to kind of hold with is relationships, but also listening. And I just to kind of acknowledge that sometimes it can be really uncomfortable to listen to feedback. We're all in it for the good, and sometimes feedback can come quite in a way that maybe isn't sensitive to all the hard work that's gone into what's been going on. But I encourage everybody to lean into that discomfort and be courageous enough to kind of dig a bit deeper and find out what's behind that, what could we learn, ask the community what's missing, and that can often happen when you've got divides in your cultural divides in your community, needing to build trust, it's really beneficial to us that we have a diverse team of volunteers and staff who have relationships established in the community. And I think that that thing again about wanting people to feel done with, not done to, is really important for this. So we have tried to do consulting where we can, and usually include food when we're doing that. So, or if you're in a pub, that might be possible. It might be possible for everyone, but tea and cake and a gathering with a few questions, conversation starters about what's actually missing for this community, what's important to this community, to help find some of those answers, and also to see where people are have more in common than than that separates them. I think those events can be really valuable, with a caution that it takes time and it's hard work and you can't please everybody. I'm not suggesting we bend to every bit of feedback, but we have had examples where we've actually built some really trusting relationships off the back of somebody being quite critical and misunderstanding each other's intentions, and actually taking the time to understand a bit more can really be fruitful in the end. So yeah, I think that's kind of the full breadth of what I wanted to share. I think just to use just remembering that woman in reception that we talked about at the beginning, she came, if she had been going to a hospital for her antenatal care, she would have been invisible, really. She would have been a number in a list and invisible to the surroundings she was in. But because we are these community-minded organisations, we have the possibility of making people who feel a bit invisible visible again, and working out how we can be bold enough to ask the difficult questions and imagine a better future for our communities. Your context might be different, but I feel that the impact on individuals, whether we're a small rural organisation or a big urban one, I think the impact on individuals is really life-changing. And if we can all continue, then I hope our communities will be transformed, not by big policy stuff at the top, although that is important, but also by human relationships. So yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much for inviting me and letting me talk for so long, and happy to answer any questions. I think I saw someone noted the question about the pillars. So our pillars were protect the planet, serve our community, and improve equity. And other than that, I think I'm done.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Laura. I think during the planning of this, I having been to Flows, I knew you'd be wonderful because I know how wonderful Flows is, and but I sort of I wondered if we'd come up against a little bit of friction just because of the urban rural split between what Plunkett groups do and what you guys do. But it seems to me that there is so much common ground, and the things that I will take away from what you said, and I'm really glad that Caroline asked the question as well in the chat, is that idea of figuring out whether we deliver it, we work with somebody to deliver it, or we signpost somewhere else. So I think that's really key. And your idea that we can't do it all ourselves, and just understanding our strengths and weaknesses. But my favorite bit was the idea of making invisible people visible. As somebody who works within social impact at Plunkett, that is really at the heart of what I want to be able to do. And on a smaller scale, as you rightly say, Laura, we are able to make this more human. At the NHS, they are so stretched that it's just impossible for them to do that in many cases. So the fact that you're able to do that, but it's not just from a medical side of things either. We can make the invisible feel visible just by the way we interact with people, making them feel valued, making them feel seen. I've got a lot of questions, but this isn't about me. Has anybody got any questions for Laura? I'm acutely aware of how busy she is, and she's been so generous with her time. But please, if you have any questions, please put your hand up, or I'll just start on my litany of questions. So, I mean, to get the ball rolling, I suppose one of my things with community businesses, when things are going well and we're on a track, there's always that idea of how do we evolve? How do we improve our services? From a flows point of view, Laura, how often do you sort of think about diversifying and adding to what you do, and how much within that do you come up with ideas that never really see the light of day?
Um, I think we have got to a place now where when staff bring new ideas, we have said, okay, can you actually give us a plan that explains how this is going to work and how it's going to be sustainable? And because by very, I mean, I'm talking about big projects because the reality is every project idea, you might as well double the amount of time you think it's going to take to deliver it. And we do need to be careful. But we do want to have those conversations and understand. I mean, little projects, but there are some little things that can come in quite easily that if someone's able to hold it, like for example, somebody found a book scheme where you get unpublished books and they go in the cafe and people come and buy them. And it's just a really nice way of unpublished authors getting their work sold somewhere that isn't Amazon. That sort of scheme, a staff member in the cafe just set it up and did it. So there are some things that feel like they're okay, but a lot of the time you do find, right, it sounds like a simple solution. Actually, let's really think about it. We do try to scrutinize things where we can because we have come unstuck. An example of that is we have some lovely groups that do cycle training with the women in the holidays. But the first year we did that, we just thought it would be really simple. The cycle trainer comes and does the group and that's it. And then it turned out, we had to do all of this, getting all of the kit for the women, making they weren't ready to weren't confident on how to lock up their bikes. They didn't want to wear a helmet. They needed a high, all these sort of little things which layer on. So you always thinking like just take a step back before diving in too quickly. I think we are getting a bit more strategic. I don't think it was like that at the beginning, and I don't think it can be. I think you sometimes need to be free to try stuff out and make mistakes, but where we are now at the scale we are, it's becoming harder there's not a lot of room for new. And it's more a case for us now of constantly evaluating what we are doing and tweaking what we're doing. Yeah, I think that an honest answer, or are we still? I mean, the food co-ops thing is quite new, but that's very much grown out of our food poverty work. It's been building over a few years. Yeah, sorry, I don't know if that was a very useful answer, but
No, brilliant. And one other thing I wanted to touch, as I say, I'm aware that you're very busy, but I think one of the problems in any of these organisations, regardless of where you're situated anywhere in the world, is one around volunteering. Do you have the same issue that a lot of our groups have in terms of attracting and retaining volunteers, or because you're in a more populous area, does that sort of dissipate and you've got a wider range of people, or do you find yourselves always having to go back to the same people for these things?
yeah, it's still so there's two challenges of volunteers. One is just general retention. I think we have a good core group, but then there's peripheral people and you do lose people. There's also lots of opportunities to volunteer in Oxford, so there's more competition for the volunteer market. So I notice people that, move around different local causes because their interests change. But the two challenges, so one is kind of, retention of volunteers. The other is that we consciously have always tried to support volunteers who are coming with a bit of a need. Not all of our volunteers do. Some come because they are a retired professional and they want to do, something social. But we also have people who have social workers, who have mental health challenges, who have social anxiety. And that takes a lot of capacity of the staff member supporting those volunteers, and we have to do more kind of caretaking along the way. And we don't want to lose that. But at the same time, we need to balance how many volunteers of high needs can we have, so that our staff are able to support them. And that's not that's for the safety of the volunteer as well as for our staff, to make sure that we don't want to kind of overcommit ourselves to working with people who actually for whom we're not going to be the right fit. So that's the other challenge is sort of the boundaries around that. And we've been sort of implementing a few things recently. So a new volunteer sign up form where we're a bit more explicit about asking what the support needs are and trying to understand that before people start so we can work out what we can do. And we're also, in terms of retention, this year we're introducing a bit more engagement with volunteers regularly, sort of a volunteer gathering volunteer, come and have a cup of tea and chat and meet and use that to update people on the work, but also just to have an opportunity to feel that sense of belonging to the community business.
Yeah, that I mean that all chimes with some of the experiences the groups we support face, I think. But it's yeah, volunteering seems to be the eternal struggle with all of these, regardless of where you are. Laura,
And I guess the other thing to say is that it's also a lot of people, you can fall into the trap of thinking it's going to be the solution to lots of things, because save time, we'll save money, we'll get a volunteer to do that, or we'll say, and actually I think you always have to think of volunteers as a really enriching, nice to have thing, but you can't base your business model on it, I don't think.
yeah, yeah, there's a ugh, I can't get the words out. There's a lot of groups that we've supported who kind of the sort of oscillate between paid and volunteer based workforces, and it can be really hard to maintain. Laura, thank you so much for your time. I've massively enjoyed this, and I think there's been loads of value, as I say, regardless of the size of the community in which you live. I think there are challenges we all face when running businesses and organisations that are for the benefit of the wider community. So thank you for sharing all of your experiences. And I'm going to send out some post-event resources, and I'll put a link to Flo's website on there as well, because, as I say, they're doing some amazing things. And whilst quite a few of you aren't particularly close to Oxford, if you are, I urge you to get down there and just hang out, because it's a lovely park to be in. But having Flo's at the heart of that really is a wonderful thing. Laura, if you would like to, you are welcome to jump off. I'm sure you've got a million and one things to do, but thank you again so much. You've been absolutely brilliant.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate you inviting me, and it's nice to talk about what we do. It's also nice to sort of feel part of a bigger that network I was saying about, to feel part of something that's expanding beyond us is really nice. So thank you so much for having me.
Not at all, not at all. Our pleasure. Hopefully speak to you soon. Thanks, Laura.
Bye.
Bye bye. So, as I say, I got so much out of that, and as I said at the start, I know that Oxford is a city, and you guys are all based rurally, but I think that it shows that regardless of the size of the organisation or the business that you're trying to run, there is a huge amount of crossover in the challenges faced, and hopefully some of what Laura said can act as an inspiration to you guys moving forward. Just to reiterate that, I think it's a really important thing about if we're going to look at widening our services and what we can realistically offer our communities, that deliver partner or signpost idea really, I mean, it's something I'm going to be thinking about for Plunkett in terms of what we can do and how we might best support you. And for the last little bit, I just wanted to think about what the benefits are to having a wide range of services. And I'm sure I'm going over old ground, and plenty of you will have thought about these in real detail. Um, I think if you have the capacity to go above and beyond what a normal business of the nature that you're involved in would offer, I think you're going to increase the amount of people coming across your threshold just because you offer more. But also, as we touched on earlier, the community-owned sector and that model does lend itself to longevity because we are invested in it emotionally and in many cases financially as well, not because we want dividends back, but because we could afford to and it was the right thing to do for our communities. But it means you're delivering more to your community. And Laura touched on this at the very beginning of her talk about sort of building trust in the community. Even if you live in a rural area in a small town or village, you won't know everybody. And one of the things I love about where I live and the community activities that go on there is it creates relationships that wouldn't necessarily have existed before. So generational relationships. I was involved with our local museum, and it brought me into contact with people I never would have had a chat with before, but built some really interesting, long-lasting friendships with shared interests. And it's kind of we are living in quite divisive times for a lot of people, and I think if we can understand our neighbours better, then it leads to a more cohesive community and a nicer place to live in general. I'm very guilty of being in my own little bubble, staring at my phone, kind of in that echo chamber of my own views being sort of played back to me. But if you get out there and you meet people in your community, you have an opportunity to experience other people's lives, other people's experiences, and it doesn't necessarily create friction, although it can do. But I think if you can go into it with an open mind, it will build trust in your community. And once you've built that trust, amazing things happen because people see one thing working, and then there is that diversification. Or we might not be able to offer this service, but Fred down the road has a contact, and this is how you develop partnerships. The more we talk to people, the easier it is to kind of think about this from a wider community point of view. And again, Laura's idea of those loudest voices in the room aren't always the ones we want to hear most. At Plunkett, we often try to think about what Laura said about who isn't here. So if we're having a meeting about our community-owned business, who isn't represented in that space? We often find, particularly in small communities, the people who volunteer for stuff are the people who volunteer for everything. So if they're on the committee of the community-owned business, they might also be on the parish council, or they might be on the town council if you live in a small town. And it's it's just that idea of kind of who isn't around, who isn't being represented here. And as I said at the start, we want these businesses to be a reflection of the communities in which they sit. Um, there's an idea about boosting the local economy because what we've realized is if you have a community owned business and you have a wide range of services, there are people who can feed into that service and their business might grow as a result of feeding into those services as well, particularly if you're thinking about what you might stock in a community owned shop. We've had people starting their own bakeries. As Laura touched on, local artists are coming down and supplying in their new gift shop as part of their refill store. So we talk about those opportunities as well. So if you have a breadth of services and things like that, you're going to need to have more people involved, and that'll give people opportunities to learn more as well. And even if it's opportunities to learn because the community-owned business is providing something, so the first aid training and things like that. But also we have a responsibility, I think, in communities to create, where possible, sustainable, inclusive situations for everybody to be involved in. And by being part of a community-owned business, you have the chance to shape those futures and those communities as well. And I think those are all really, really important. Um, we are coming towards the end of it now. You've all been sitting there very quietly and engaged brilliantly with it all, but this is a chance for you guys to ask any questions, or you might have some suggestions about things that have worked for your community-owned business. So I'm just going to open the floor and see if anybody would just like to have a bit of a chat about their experiences, or ask any questions of us, or think about, or something, perhaps something you'd like to see Plunkett do that we're not currently doing at the moment. So as I say, we've got sort of 5 or 6 minutes left to go. So the floor, hopefully, is open to you.
I had a question, but I couldn't find the hand raising button. So
That's all right, Peter.
I,
Fire
I,
away.
it was for Laura, and I was just slightly intrigued as to why they came up with a community business scheme rather than a charity. Why the model of the CBS was more appropriate for them.
I think Laura's jumped off the call now, Peter, but what I
Yeah,
can do is I'm going to drop her an email. So I will make a note of your question and feed it back to you if that works for you.
yeah. I know why we're doing it, but I was intrigued to, why it worked for her in an urban setting, and perhaps not quite a close-knit community like our village.
That's a really interesting question. And as somebody who knows East Oxford a little bit, it's one of those things in any big city, you tend to get little areas that basically cities tend to be villages that just happen to be really close to each other in a lot of cases. And I think East Oxford is a really good example of that. I think it comes together really, really well. It really is the heart of Oxford's immigrant community. Laura talked about the East Timorian community. My wife used to work in a recruitment office in Oxford, and she worked with a lot of people from that community. And it's the very kind of, it's a tight-knit community in the same way you might see from a village. So maybe, and I'm talking on Laura's behalf here, but I will ask her, maybe it was that kind of, they wanted that local feel to a more widespread and open business of that nature. But I will ask Laura. Peter, just remind me, which group are you from?
The Fox and Hounds and East Noyle, we're in the process of applying or putting together our CBS. Chris is in the call as well. He's the guy leading the push. There he is.
Ah, brilliant. And have you guys thought much about how you might diversify beyond the day-to-day of the pub with your business planning and that sort of thing?
Yeah, over to you, Chris.
Sorry, Chris, I'll throw you right under the bus there.
You're muted. You're still muted, Chris. There we
Right. Yes, we've realised that we need a second stream of revenue apart from it being a traditional boozer. And our idea is to create a coffee shop with the focus during the day, somewhere to meet, somewhere to socialise, potentially somewhere for people to work, and yeah, just somewhere where the community can get together. One consideration for us is that we already have a shop and quite a thriving community that's based around a volunteering model. So we can't rely on any sort of volunteering capacity. The village's volunteering capacity is really taken up by the shop and other activities. So we're going to have to be quite hard-nosed and ensure that our facility is a viable economic business.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think we through my work, one of the biggest challenges I face is sort of extolling the virtues of social impact for a bunch of community-owned businesses who are trying their hardest, in many cases, just to keep their heads above water. So it's sort of it's trying to find that kind of happy medium between delivering that social impact and actually delivering a business that functions financially as well. But I think if we go back to the survival rates of community-owned businesses, those really impressive numbers are a reflection of the thought and hard work that goes into it and the emotional investment from us all when we're involved in these enterprises. We've got a couple of minutes left. Is there anybody else with any questions, anything they'd like to discuss, any ideas that they've had? Feel free to speak. And in the meantime, what I'll do is I'll outline in the next couple of days. We're going to have I'll send out some resources, and it'll be sort of around looking. I'll send the slides over as well, but it'll be a couple of the impact reports and things like that we've done recently as well, and some ideas around what we've discussed, sort of distilling what Laura mentioned. Tom, I've noticed you've taken yourself off mute.
I have indeed. Tom Goff from Mentoring in Llanrothen. There's a mention earlier, so a bit of a sort of sideline to sort of the diversity of revenue streams, but there's a mention earlier about sort of campaigning to get transport improvements, because that's certainly a challenge that we have in a rural community pub. That at this time of year, the last bus that goes past there is at 6 p.m. So anyone who doesn't live within walking distance of the pub is basically left on their own after 6 p.m. It affects sort of your footfall beyond that point. So I just really a sort of question around, has anyone had success on actually campaigning to get transport links improved or anything?
I know a lot of, I say a lot. I know one or two pubs have sort of instigated their own system whereby they'll do a kind of a route in a minibus of the surrounding villages and hamlets and sort of do a drop off as per what's needed on a particular night. But I don't know if anybody on the call has any experience of having to do that. Again, Tom, I'm more than happy to look into that just as a follow-up for you. I've got all of your email addresses through the booking
Yeah.
system. So what I'll do, Tom, is I'll do some digging around, and I will get back to you on a one-to-one basis about that, if that's all right.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I'm sure that probably applies to particularly people running community pubs as well, probably more than other businesses, just because of the nature of you obviously don't want to be driving home after a night at the pub.
No, no, no. I know that sometimes in rural areas there are certain individuals that have a slightly more flexible attitude to that, shall we say. But no, I will definitely
Yeah.
get back. And Tom, if it's possible, would you be interested in having a bit of a chat with somebody who's done something similar? Because quite often it's easier to do sort of peer-to-peer chats among people. So if I can put you in touch with somebody,
Oh
would you be
yeah,
interested?
yeah, absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, we've come to 1 o'clock, and thank you so much for giving up your Wednesday lunchtime to spend time with us. It's massively appreciated. I've had a great time. I've really enjoyed listening to what Laura had to say and just sharing some of those ideas with you. As always, we are here to help you as much as possible. If anybody has any questions about what we've discussed today, if anybody comes back to it later and thinks, "Oh, I wish I'd asked that," my email's on the screen now, so you should all have my email address just through having booked on. But if you have any questions about anything pertaining to your community-owned business, whether it be to do with this event or otherwise, please get in touch. If I can't help you, I will certainly find one of our team members who can. We're incredibly proud of the work we do at Plunkett. We've got an amazing team just doing fantastic stuff every day, and we're always trying our best to help you where possible. A huge thank you to Sarah for manning the chat and all of that kind of carry on. It's a very difficult job to do on your own running one of these things, and well, frankly, I'd be lost without Sarah's help today. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for your time. Lovely to see you all, and hopefully see you at another one of these soon.